had a great week so far. And I'll just quickly share my tab with everyone here. So as I said, I'm here to talk about filming on the go. And like I said, I hope everyone is safe and well. And today what we're going to really focus on within filming on the go is using smartphones as your primary shooting device and pivoting to mobile filmmaking as a way of journalism. So the agenda for the day is to first understand why mobile filmmaking is a viable option, what election coverage usually looks like, and break down production on mobile. Some of you may have questions as we go along. So like it's just said about the housekeeping rules, we request you to hold on to them as we dedicated some time at the end of the session to answer your questions. Feel free to add them into the chat box as we go along, but we'll be addressing them at the end of the session today. So to start with, why mobile filmmaking? What's so good about it? Why should we go for that over traditional videography? Well, the answer is pretty simple. If you want to go, if you want to film on the go, it's perhaps the easiest way to get great results. This is because having both a high quality recorder and a high speed delivery system combined in one lightweight unit makes smartphone or mobile journalism a great option in terms of affordability and portability. Phones are also very popular, and they're not as loud as a traditional videography setup. So interviewees are more likely to accept a request for a feature, and that quality makes mobile filmmaking approachable. And it's also efficient, finally, like it replaces the hassle of shooting, editing, delivering, or uploading your work through multiple different systems and machines with this one little device that almost all of us would have in our phones or may even be using to watch this webinar, right? So let's look at some examples of election coverage that has mostly been shot on mobile, right? So when it comes to pre-election coverage, you may want to plan and announce your coverage schedule. You might want to interview campaign workers, the general population. You might also cover rallies and manifestos. And if you get the chance, it might be great to get candidates head-to-head debating with each other, right? So this is all examples of pre-election content that journalists usually tend to cover. Now, how do you do it on mobile? Well, it's pretty simple. You just replace that massive camera and everything with a small mobile phone. And I mean, this is an example of the content that we're talking about. For example, I'm just going to put it on mute. So here, the host is kind of covering, or the reporter is talking to the general population and getting their thoughts on the upcoming election. Basically, taking a pulse before the election season starts, or just before the election start. Next, you have a video from the same channel where they are actually taking you behind the scenes. So this is also something you can do to sort of foster more trust with your audience. It's a great opportunity to take people behind the scenes and give them a glimpse of how you work, because that often can be the difference between them subscribing to you or them coming back to you to watch something, or because they understand how you operate, right? So that's another example of pre-election coverage that you might want to do, and you can easily do on mobile. Just to move on from here. So when it comes to election day coverage, you may want to cover turnouts and reactions to the turnouts. You may want to cover opinion and exit polls as they start coming in. And it's very easy to do this and give regular updates via mobile, right? You don't have to sort of, traditionally what you'd do is you'd shoot it, you'd send it off to your studio either, or upload it via the van, maybe go live from time to time. But there would be a whole process to it, which requires a lot of different steps. Whereas when you do it on mobile, it's as simple as choosing to just pick up your phone and record, right? So here's another example. So this journalist is on the rooftop somewhere in Bihar, talking about the elections, giving them a coverage of the first phase of elections, right? So it was very easy for him to just pick up the phone and record this update. It doesn't rely on anyone, doesn't rely on having a van or anything like that, right? So, that also makes it faster and more efficient. Now, when it comes to post-election coverage, you may want to cover winners and mandates, maybe even cover the opposition. You may want to, again, go back and take the pulse of the supporters or about the general population and get a take on what they think about the result of the election. You may want to cover the swearing-in ceremony. You may want to stitch together some highlights from the election season and put them up as a recap. The example we have here has basically this reflects the unique quality of mobile filmmaking that helps you gain access to many people, to people at any time without seeming intimidating. So here an opposition politician is being interviewed at night just before he sets off to travel, and being on mobile certainly makes it easier to get the scoop out there quickly. Both go to them, approach that politician and record the interview and send it off into the internet and into the world very quickly. Another aspect of mobile filmmaking that you can, that's great, is that you can do it with little or no crew support. So you can literally have, and basically this enables you to do solo reporting, and this means that your resources can be split to have more people in the field at different places at the same time. So this is also something to consider. If you, instead of having 2 or 3 people units that go out to shoot, you may have 1 person or maximum 2 people. So that means you have more people to spare to go to different places and cover more area, right? It's all about getting the most coverage, right? So that's it for basically, we've kind of established mobile filmmaking's benefits and uses in election coverage. So let's maybe take a deep dive into the production tips and best practices that can help you report with high quality content on the go. So here's a diagram to illustrate what you need to do before you start production, when in pre-production, what you do during production, in the middle there, and what comes after production, which is post-production. Now, before you start production, it would be expected that you've done your ideation, your content planning, your equipment selection, and your manager logistics. So this essentially means that you have your content calendar. Maybe, during election season, it's usually mapped to the election calendar of the different parties that are involved. And you're now ticking off video ideas. So if you've decided to go to 3 rallies of a certain party and take interviews of the supporters or of the candidates, then you have those ideas ready now. All you have to do is go out and start shooting, right? So the first aspect we'll tackle within production is camera. Right now, when shooting with mobile, some basic things to keep in mind is that you should always clean your lens. This will help you avoid any dust speckles, maybe a fingerprint mark. So just cleaning your lens off with a soft cloth will help. Next, you should always place and mount your phone, preferably on a rig. So basically a tripod, a gimbal, or a selfie stick. This will help you make sure that you don't get shaky footage and that it's easier to watch for your viewers. And finally, before you record, select the highest resolution available on your phone, so that again you get the maximum quality out there. If you want to avoid interruptions, and you don't want interruptions, put your phone on do not disturb mode or on airplane mode, so you can focus on filming your content and getting it done quickly without any notifications popping up, without the phone ringing suddenly, and then you can obviously quickly switch back to normal silent mode or normal ring mode once you're done shooting, right? Now, when you're setting up your phone to film, you also want to think about framing. So, we talked about how to sort of clean it and what settings to do and all of that. Now, how or which direction it's placed in is very important. So firstly, assess the content that you expect to capture and place yourself based on your objectives. So if your objective is coverage, aim to be far so you can get a wider frame. On the other hand, if your objective is to get an interview, you may want to get up close to your subject and be sort of in the middle of the madness. Use the grid to frame up your shot. This can make for a more aesthetically pleasing frame, and most phones will have the option to enable a 3x3 grid. Also account for more movement while reporting from the field. The more agile you are, the better. You never know where a scoop is going to come from, where a new story is going to come from. So the fact that you can move around quickly will really help. And even a movement of the camera, right? Like, so if you're doing a coverage-based thing, you want to be able to move into interview as quickly as possible. Same for if you're doing an interview and you want to suddenly, you may want to finish the interview and then go back to coverage. Plan ahead and make sure you know the movements that you're going to be making. What's great about a phone is that you can just pop it into your pocket and literally you can walk anywhere very comfortably. You can take a cycle. You don't have to worry about expensive equipment breaking because it's just a phone that fits in your pocket. Now, finally, if you're shooting in 4K, frame a medium wide shot. So a lot of phones do allow you to shoot in 4K, and many people have, a conundrum when it comes to do I need to shoot 4K? Well, most of the videos that people watch these days are probably going to be on mobile, right? So they don't necessarily need 4K, but you could use 4K because it'll help you edit better. and you can vary your frame, because if you shoot a larger frame, you can make it smaller later in post, so you can zoom into it in post, so in editing. So that's basically on framing. Just to give you an example of good framing, we have, so good framing is all about getting the headroom right. If you're framing a human subject, you want to make sure that they're usually intersecting on the upper horizontal line of your grid. If you're center frame, this is how you might want to do it. And good headroom basically means that you have space, the person has space to move, lean forwards and move backwards without having the head cut off. So make sure that these simple things are kept in mind. When it comes to shooting yourself, you can easily, if you're using a tripod, for example, you can easily set up the tripod at a certain height and then measure it and keep that height consistent. Maybe use tape to mark the positions that you've stopped your tripod at. It's very easy to do, and it makes sure that if you're on the same level as where tripod is going to be sitting, then it's easy for you to set up the tripod, and just by putting your phone onto the tripod, you know that the frame is going to be right, ensuring that you maintaining the same distance away from the camera, right? Now that we've kind of covered framing and the camera settings and everything, when it comes to selecting the right rig, you have to choose the most suitable option based on your movements. So most tripods will allow you to do panning or tilting, as is demonstrated on the slide. So it's kind of like looking side to side and looking up to down, right? Panning and tilting. And then when it comes to, say, if you use a gimbal or a selfie stick, they let you pan and tilt as well, but you can also make dollying, sliding, or pedestal movements. That means that instead of just looking side to side or looking up to down, you're moving side to side, you're moving up and down, you're moving forwards and backwards. So this kind of gives you a bit more versatility, and making sure you're on a gimbal always helps because it's going to be stable, right? Always think about making sure your footage is not shaky. Our hands, no matter how still we think they are, when you put that video onto, say, a desktop, you'll realize how shaky it is. So always rely on a rig. I use something as simple as a phone stand at home, because when I'm shooting at home, I can just put a stool on top of my desk and then place the phone stand, and then I'm ready to shoot, right? So yeah, now to kind of cover some best practices quickly on the camera front, like I said just now, mount your camera on a tripod, gimbal, or a selfie stick, or any other rig. If you don't have one, if you're shooting at home, use books, use your laptop. You can use a lot of things as a rig, as long as your phone has a stable support. That's all that's required. And make sure that your footage is not shaky. Secondly, use the back camera of your phone. That's always going to be the one with the better quality than your front camera. And look into the lens when you're filming. This will again help you make sure that you're engaged with your audience and they feel the kind of effect of eye contact. Next, when you're done setting up your phone, you might want to lock focus and exposure on yourself. So to create a smoother viewing experience, and basically what this does is it balances and makes sure that your focus doesn't shift mid-shot, that your footage doesn't get brighter or darker in the middle of the shot, and it makes sure that the colors stay the same. A lot of times you'll notice that suddenly something has become blue and then a little bit green. So what this does is it helps you make sure that you're locked on your settings. To do this, most phones will let you either press and hold on that darker spot. So for me, it'll be my shirt, I think, in this case. So if I press and hold on that, it might lock. If not, sometimes you might have to tap it, and then there'll be a lock icon that comes around that area that you've tapped. And if you hit the lock icon, it'll lock the exposure there. A lot of phones also have the setting of reducing and increasing exposure a little bit. So use that if you think you need to, right? And once if you've done that right, most camera apps will respond with the prompt saying AE/AF lock, which means auto exposure / autofocus lock. Now, you've done your camera settings, you've placed it, you know how to shoot it. The one final thing to remember, and I'm going to say this again later on as well, is keep backup power and memory handy. It's kind of as essential as a phone is, because you never know when your phone battery drains out. You never know when you run out of memory, or when you end up getting too much content one day and then suddenly your phone storage is full. So to avoid missing out on any content, make sure you have 2 power banks, some memory handy that you can easily kind of use in case you run out of either, right? Now, the main element that really affects how your frame looks is lighting. So there are 3 major categories when it comes to lighting, especially when shooting on mobile. Natural light being your best friend. While it's hard to find quiet outdoor areas, your footage is going to be best filmed outdoors in the day, because natural light is just like this gift from the heavens or whoever is sitting up there. And that really helps make sure that everything is exposed well in your frame. If you don't have access to natural light, or maybe if you're indoors, a mounted or a studio light will help. Will help as a great option too. Whether it's a ring light, an add-on LED, that you can kind of put on top of your phone, or a phone cover with its own light. A lot of phones have these small LED lights that come on the cover. So using that, you can sort of make sure that you're getting quality footage even in lower light areas. And finally, you have practical lights. Practical lights are lights that already exist in your shoot space. So this can be your floor lamp, your ceiling light, your wall-mounted lights, and basically even a tube light is a practical light, right? It's basically anything that's already in the space or is part of the environment. Now, make sure that if you're using practical light, you should only use it if you don't have natural or mounted light available, or you can't access it at that point. And B, if you are using it, make sure your subject is facing the practical light. So if that is my practical light source, I'm facing it, right? Make sure that happens. A quick tip to remember here is that if you have the option to schedule an interview outdoors, avoid 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. slots. This is when the sun is usually aiming straight down at us, and it does not make for an aesthetically pleasing frame. If you have no choice and you have to do it, then you can use a simple hack, which I'll show you in just a couple slides from here, right? To give you some examples of what the different kind of light will also look like, as you can see, natural light is evenly distributed across my frame. A mounted light, on the other hand, can help create some contrast because its power reduces the further the light falls. And practical lights at my place are ceiling mounted, so they've resulted in these unappealing shadows falling down. So you can see that my eyes are not illuminated. You can't really see my chin anymore because there's a full dark spot because of the shadow that's falling down. So that's a little unappealing. Similar to how top light would affect your frame outdoors. Now, some of us may not have access to store-bought mounted lights. So to solve that, we have a few quick and easy DIY solutions that you might want to keep in mind. Number one, use a torch. You can just put some butter paper on it to diffuse the light. And this can help you illuminate your subject when you don't have any light sources available. Alternatively, make your own. Stick an LED strip around your phone cover and attach it to a battery. It's very simple to do, it's cheap, it's effective, and if you go to an electronics store and give them a phone cover and say, hey, I need a small LED strip wrapped around this, they might be able to help you with that as well. Finally, use a reflector when shooting against the light. So a reflector is basically going to reflect back light into your frame, and it can be as powerful as any other lighting, depending on what light source you're reflecting. So when it's against sunlight, it's as powerful as any other light. In fact, maybe even more powerful than using a ring light or something. This is what the hack that I'm talking about when it comes to shooting between 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. and when you have top light, you can use a reflector to reflect that light back onto your subject. So in fact, a lot of times, even when you're shooting at home and you have a light in front of you, you realize that there's still some shadows falling downwards. And simply by placing a reflector on your lap, you can eliminate those shadows. So this is a trick that you can use in order to, up your lighting game and just make it a little easier to watch your videos and more sort of aesthetically pleasing. At the end of the day, though, ensure that you have enough light. Where you get it from is secondary. So, I mean, that can be used as a rule of thumb. So now to quickly touch on perhaps the most important aspect of filmmaking, audio, right? So the thing here is that often we focus so much on video, but like you might still have, not skip a video because of shaky footage, but you're more likely to skip it because of bad audio. And we often underestimate its power. So when recording sound, remember to keep a few key things in mind. Number one, use a microphone, whether it's a wired earphone, wireless buds, or an external mic. So when it comes to external mics, you have shotgun mics, which are kind of placed on your camera device, so placed on your phone and pointing towards you. You have a condenser mic, which you kind of hold, and all of us are used to it with journalism, and a lavalier mic, which is basically like a collar mic, right? Use one of these. You can even use wireless buds, you can use your wired earphones, but you use one of these external mics to up your sound quality when it comes to shooting video, because onboard mics on most phones don't work great when shooting video. They're not made for that. They're designed for us to talk on the phone like this, right? So you're not going to be this close to your camera at all when you're shooting video. So always use an external mic. Secondly, avoid noise and echo. as much as possible. This can really harm the viewing experience, and we all want our audience to have a smooth one. And thirdly, keep your subject close to your recording device. The closer they are, the better it picks up the sound. So if you're going to hold a collar mic or a condenser mic, put it against their their chin maybe, or just like here, right? If this is the mic, I want it here. If it's a lavalier mic, you want it up on the collar. You don't want it like down at the belly button. You don't want it at the pocket. You're not going to pick up the sound well. So the closer you are, the better you're going to pick up the sound or your sound. So and a pro tip here is that if you're using an external mic, you may already get a dead cat or basically a soft, fluffy covering for it. You can use it to minimize noise or wind, and I'll show you an example in a bit on how that works. So while technicals are super important in filmmaking, talking to camera in an engaged manner is equally important. Now, this is not easy for many of us, myself included, but these 3 P's should help. So imagine you've set up your camera, you have a great scoop, and you want to cover it, or basically you just want to practice speaking in front of the camera because you're not that confident, right? It could be either of them. Now, to start with, go with the 3 P's. First, plan. Not only plan for your immediate reporting, but make templates on how you will report. In the field, when you're trying to get a piece of breaking news out and report it in an articulated way, it's important to share your news as accurately and as clearly as possible while you're racing against time. Templates also help your viewers get familiar with your style of reporting. In cases where your story isn't time sensitive, maybe write down the key talking points and statistics before you start. Next, practice that particular news story. In fact, practice in your free time too. It will only help. We can skip the practicing step if the news is again time sensitive. And this is where if you plan ahead with your templates, it will help, and you can practice your templates instead. Finally, perform. Get in front of camera, look straight into the lens, and start sharing your news story. Each video you make is a place to express your passion for journalism. So use that to motivate yourself and engage your audience. I also like to reiterate the point of approachability that we established earlier. If a phone is approachable for others, it's likely to be approachable for you as well. So embrace that, practice, plan, practice, and perform. And when you're planning and when you're making that template, a quick tip to keep in mind is that, if your style of reporting is usually based on, say, who, what, when, where, why, then phrase that out so that all you have to do is put in the information for that particular news story. And then anyone who watches your video will probably make sense of your video out of habit as well. So that also helps. It creates familiarity with your audience. Now that we learned about phone cameras, rigs, lighting, audio, we can think about building a production kit, right? So these are some basics that you can start with. For stationary filming, so if you're planning to stay still, pair a phone with a studio light maybe. So first obviously a tripod, an external mic, and maybe a studio light. A studio light is basically a light that you put on a light stand instead of having it mounted on your phone. If you're going to be stationary, you may be able to access the studio light and use it. So that can help. If you're expecting to move around a lot, pair it with a gimbal or a selfie stick. Use an external mic always, and maybe use a mounted light if you don't have natural light available. A mounted light will go on top of your camera, so it moves with your camera as you move around, right? Now, and like I said earlier, regardless of whichever way you're shooting, ensure you carry power banks and backup memory with you. They can come really, really, really handy. I cannot stress how handy they'll be. So yeah, here's a quick illustration of an example kit, and I'll show you it in action in a second as well. This is basically a typical selfie stick kind of mount. I put the phone in the middle. I've attached a shotgun mic to the port at the bottom of the phone, and I've added a mounted light on top, right? This is battery powered. This is using the battery from the phone. So basically it's a single unit that you can move around and shoot with and will help you get good footage. Now, to give you an example of how good that footage is going to be, I'm going to show you a quick video here. I wanted to first look out, in this first watch that we're going to do, I want you to look out for the sound. So just listen to how the sound changes when he adds this fluffy covering that we have here, and how different it is before he adds it, right? So just to give you a quick example. So here, I'm just going to play this video.
Better, maybe some better background wind protection. Now let's put on the windscreen and see how that sounds. And you can see some of the furries in camera frame.
Notice how much better the sound quality is because he's outdoors. He's obviously in It's not a crowded area, but it's a very windy area because there's a lot of open space. So this really helps. Another thing he's done here, and I'm going to keep playing this after this.
Wind protection.
Just hear it again.
Now let's put on the windscreen and see how that sounds. Now you can see some of the furries in camera frame.
So I'm just going to play it on mute now. So what you can also notice here is that as he's walking along, you don't see the exposure or the brightness on his video change. His face doesn't start looking different. This is because he's also locked focus and exposure on himself. So the background is not that visible. It's a little blurred out, but he's very clear and there's no brightness shifts. So it just makes the video look more professional. So this is all the best practices that I mentioned. He's mounted the camera. He's using the back camera. He's shooting with the Rode mic on it. So it's like with the fluffy covering. So an external mic, a mounted light, a camera, back facing, all of that is used here, and it's coming out to have great footage. So this is something that you can kind of benchmark as what you want to achieve when it comes to shooting quality. I think, one second, I'm just going to increase it at 360p right now. So just see it. And in fact, he's shot it in 4K. So again, I'm just going to show you the quality and how great it is here. Just look at this. You can't tell that it's shot on a phone. It could be shot on a DSLR for all we know, right? So if you follow the best practices, you can get great results with the phone, and you will not miss your traditional videography setup, right? Now, once you film the footage, you may start thinking about how you want to put it together and edit. So here are some basic pointers to keep in mind. Now, the first one I'm really going to stress on because we've gotten this question a lot. When you pick an app, there are many mobile first editing tools out there, and I could tell you like 15 tools that do all the same things equally well, but it's not for me to decide what works best for you, right? So you want to figure out what works best for you and for your device. This can sometimes be a little confusing because of the range of apps that are out there. But two things to remember. One, most of them do the same thing. So they'll cut and stitch audio, video, they let you add text and images, right? That's the basic tools that they'll all do. As a starting point for you, you may want to think about searching for a video editing app and then put in your device name. So maybe if I have a Google Pixel, I'll say video editing app for Google Pixel 4. And then I'll put that onto Google or YouTube and I'll look at reviews made by other creators. Because a lot of reviews are out there. The 3-4 things that you want to keep in mind is that, one, it's you who's editing. So you need to be comfortable with how that editing interface really works. So that is totally subjective as to each individual. Secondly, it's about hardware. A lot of software or a lot of apps are built for phones that don't have great processing power or great RAM. Some really need a good amount of RAM and processing power. So depends on all of that. And some apps may be tailor built for certain phones, some may not be. So the research point here is very important. And making sure that it works for you and for your device is something that only you can tell if it's right or not, right? So, but firstly, you want to pick an app. I would recommend maybe, spend 20-30 minutes once, download 3 different apps, shoot some footage, and just edit the same video 3 times on 3 different apps, and just think about how that experience has been for you, how easy it is for you to make that video, how well it works on your phone. That also will give you a good idea on which one to use, right? So once you pick your app, the next thing you want to do is you review your footage. So instead of putting it in the edit and then placing all the footage first watch all of it, right? Go through all of your footage, make notes on which clips you want to use and how you want to place them. This will save you a lot of time later on because it is the one thing about mobile editing is that it's not that easy to be precise as you would be on a desktop. So to avoid that, time constraint of not being able to be precise, you can review your footage beforehand, plan it out on paper. So all you're doing is executing that paper edit when you're on your phone editing. And finally, think about supporting content. When you plan your footage, this will also help you because you'll realize that you need supporting content there. And often reporting on the ground doesn't translate to enough footage. So plan and use supporting or archival media if you can't get footage firsthand. Remember that you want to ensure you have permissions to use the content and that you're not infringing on anyone's copyright. So now, finally, the one point I want to make before we get into a little detail on considerations when filming for elections is remember that consistency is really key. Whether it's your packaging, your style, your framing, your equipment, your props, consistency can help your content become more identifiable and more unique. When it comes to packaging, think about animations, think about title slates, segment slates, graphics. Stick to the same font, same colors across all your videos. This can add to a smoother viewing experience. It can be a reflection of you and your brand and your video making techniques, and it can ensure that your viewers make sense of your videos out of habit, because they know that this color means that statistic, or they can tell that this segment slate means, okay, this is the thing I'm looking forward to the most. So if you give them these little cues using your packaging in your video, it'll make a big difference. Also, your style, whether it's your clothing, your speaking, or otherwise, it can again help you and your content become more identifiable to viewers. The same goes for your framing as well, right? Like I was saying earlier, locking on a fixed distance away from your phone and a fixed camera height, it will ensure that you record in the same frame every time. This can elevate the quality of your videos. And I think like our hosts from DataLEADS are tired of me saying this, but I've been placing my laptop in the exact same position every day. And if you come back, for the second time to the PollCheck, you'll notice that I'm in the same frame. So doing that makes sure that people recall who you are. They don't really need to see your face. They can see the frame and tell who it is, right? So creating recall is important. I know that when you're on the go, it's not that easy. So if you have a fixed camera height and fixed distance away from the camera, whether you're indoors or outdoors, doesn't matter, because it means that your head will be in the same place, exactly same place, every time you record video. And that means if someone is scrolling through watching like 5 or 10 of your videos at the same time, again, they'll see the same frame every time, and they'll kind of note that consistency in their subconscious. So that really helps. Finally, when it comes to equipment or props, they can also help build consistency, right? Mic flags are like the age-old journalism identifiers, and making one for yourself isn't that difficult really. So you may decide to incorporate another prop even, or none at all, but remember to keep it consistent throughout, and think about all the scenarios that you'll be using it in. So one thing I like to remember is, okay, I may be in front of camera, I may have a guest reporter in front of camera, I may put my phone in front of me and hold the mic in front of it. So how many different ways am I going to use that prop or that mic, and make sure that it works for all those different ways. So before you start shooting, you can make sure that you're going to be creating content that can be consistent in a scalable way, right? So just quickly, I know we're running out of time a little bit, but when we're jumping into the election season, the production needs tend to be varied. So we find ourselves shooting both indoors and outdoors, or at home, or at controlled and uncontrolled places, or different ways that you can say the same thing. We also sometimes, in fact, I just want to call this out. I know that the pandemic is still on, right? A lot of us may not be in good health, may not be able to step out to shoot anything. So you may be at home at all times. So what you want to consider then, or what you want to consider when you're going out, is very important. You may cover multiple formats. You might do one-on-one interviews. You might cover large-scale campaign rallies. Considering their individual challenges is also important when planning or reporting. And all this finally boils down to the need for mobility. And that's why, as the name suggests, mobile phones are great, because they help you be mobile, and they let you move easily. So because a scoop can be anywhere, and you can be ready to film on the go, and that is imperative. That is the most important objective for, I think, everyone here, that you get your news story out as quickly as possible. So taking a closer look at in-home or indoor filming is that, one, there's a lot of control there, that you can, you can cover the windows if you want to block some light. You can send people out if it's too noisy. You can close the windows to reduce noise. You can do a lot of more. You can control the environment a lot better if you are indoors, right? And that allows you to be more consistent. You also have the ability to set up a mini studio at home, or in fact, even map out a mini studio setup that you can create in any indoor environment. So that can again track back to the idea of a fixed camera distance and camera height, maybe even a fixed camera angle. So I might decide that all my interviews will happen where my camera is 35 degrees from the subject, and at 6 feet away at a certain height, and they are sitting on a chair. That's it. So that basic thing can make sure that all my interviews look the same, and that can help build consistency as well, right? If you're shooting at home and you have to stay there because of the pandemic again, you can set up a mini studio. You can sort of be more elaborate with your production as well. So you can you can plan for where your graphics will show up. You can give your audience a consistent experience. You can add a channel logo at the back. So you can do a lot of different things if you're, if you have control. When it comes to common election formats, interviews are the ones that are more likely to happen in a controlled or indoor environment. So use this to your advantage whenever possible, and sort of take these best practices in mind. Now, when it comes to outdoors, the opposite is true. We lack control and need to account for more versatility. So remember that you may need to move around a lot more. So you might need a gimbal or a selfie stick to stay stable on the go. Remember that on the other hand, while you're indoors, you may have access to one or two subjects. When you're outside, you have access to a lot more coverage material. You have a lot more people who you can interview. You have a lot more things that you can kind of record and shoot. You're also more likely to encounter subjects like campaign workers or the general public. So overall, in an uncontrolled or an outdoor environment, it's important to have a priority straight. So keeping that in mind, choose a spot to film where you can avoid noise, and then try and ensure good light by having your subject face the light. Finally, you want to try and ensure you have a nice frame, keeping the headroom in mind and everything. And just remember that even though good looking video may seem important, I say again, it's not as important as getting good sound. So sound is the first priority, light is the second priority, and then frame is the third priority. Because a badly filmed video, like I said, may not make you click the next video as much as a bad sound may. Finally, when it comes to election season, you're most likely to be in an outdoor setting during campaign rallies. So remember that if you're planning to cover campaign rallies, right? Maybe go there early and find the right spots which are going to be relatively empty towards the back, or maybe behind the stage if you have access. So you might want to think about these things beforehand. Now, that's it for the workshop today. And I think that's it for my sort of part in PollCheck. So I want to congratulate DataLEADS and the rest of the Google News Initiative team, all the other speakers that you're going to be encountering today as well, for a great, series of workshops that we've run over the last couple of weeks. It's been an honor to be a part of it and to talk to the reporters and the truth warriors, as Syed sir has mentioned. A quick note here, we would really, really appreciate your feedback on this session. It ensures that we come back with more effective workshops with your feedback, and it helps our team learn what we're doing well. You can scan this QR code, or I think Shivali will be pasting the link right now in the chat box. Use that. It'll take a minute or maximum 2 minutes for you to fill it out and really, really help us. So I urge you to please fill out the feedback form. And just before I sort of start the Q&A, I want to mention, I really hope this is valuable to you, and I happy to engage via email and everything. But thank you again for kind of tuning into this session, and best of luck for your reporting during the upcoming elections. Shivali, let's take some questions.
Yeah, Anuj, thank you so much for yet another great session. I'll first take up the questions. So one of the favorite questions of all participants till date for all sessions has been, please tell us the name of a few preferred video editing apps.
See, I think that the reason I've not been sort of suggesting app names in particular is two. One, I've been editing for 7 to 8 years now, 6 to 8 years now. So my level of expertise and what works for me is very different from what might work for you. So it's very important to try everything out yourself once. Number one. Number two, all devices differ. I could tell you an app that's not even available on your phone. So it's going to be moot for me as well, and for you to sort of hear my answer or what I use to edit on my phone. And finally, it's important that you've researched it and that you also believe in the tools that you're using, right? Like a lot of us have been skeptical to use our phones to record because it's like, oh, I don't know how good it'll be, or everyone, all the professionals use this equipment. Why am I using my phone? All of that. So it's going to take time for you to build trust onto those tools that you use. So it's very important that you know and you sort of kind of done your own research as well. Though, having said those three things, what you can do to find the preferred app for you or for your phone is that I think a lot of app stores like Play Store will rank the search when you search video editing tool. They'll rank the search based on people who use that on your device and stuff like that, if I'm not mistaken. So try and search it on your phone. Maybe 3 people who have 3 different phones will see 3 different top search top results on the Play Store search. So, and that will tell you which one is more preferred for you and your phone. That's, I think, what I'll leave you with, and resist the urge of saying the name of the app that I use.
Right. Yeah. All right. The next question is, if I'm shooting outdoors with my phone, how do I get the best light possible?
If you're shooting outdoors and you're in the day, if you can choose the time that you shoot in, try and shoot before 11 a.m. or after 3 p.m. If you cannot choose the time, two things that you can do: go to a shaded area, not indoors, but like just in the shade. If it's between 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., use a reflector, like I mentioned earlier. And essentially what you want to do is, if you are the subject, you want to face the light and then put the camera in the same direction that the light is coming from. That will ensure that your frame, including you and behind you, is lit up well. Especially when you're outdoors, it's very easy to get it right. All you have to do is just, yeah, I would say the only thing you need to keep in mind is put yourself in front of the light and not the light behind you. I think that makes sense.